Yeah, right here. Just set it down, quick. Hurry up, Joe. Yeah, got it. All right.
Okay, wait a minute, George. Just pin my arms down. Great. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. Could you just squeeze my butt? Oh, yeah, that's it. Okay. Wait a minute.
Oh.
No, George.
Oh.
One of the most memorable events from my childhood was when I underwent surgery to repair a hernia. For those of you who don't know, a hernia occurs when internal organs protrude through muscular lining, and is usually caused by physical strain. I had an inguinal hernia, which meant my visceral bulge was located just above my groin area. Apart from the minor discomfort from consuming medication rectally for the first time, the other mouth, the entire procedure was relatively painless. The recovery process mostly consisted of lying still, which is really easy to do when you own a 24-inch Magnavox and live within a mile of the nearest Blockbuster Video.
Hi, I'm Jeff. You look like you could use some help.
Yeah, hi. My wife sent me in for a movie, and I can't remember the name.
Ew, that's tough. Good luck.
Thanks.
I don't recall every single movie I watched during my recovery, but the one that stuck with me the most is Memoirs of an Invisible Man. The longevity of this memory is most likely due to the fact that one scene reminded me of my groin area's close encounter with surgical weaponry.
Looking for something, Nick?
I'm sure what I'm about to say is obvious considering the last image of Chevy Chase's see-through crotch, but let me be clear. Memoirs of an Invisible Man is a different type of Invisible Man movie. Based on the best-selling novel by H.F. Saint, the film tells the story of a stock analyst named Nick Holloway, who gets turned invisible after a particle collider accidentally malfunctions. Apart from the difficulty of eating Chinese food and putting on his clothes, the most challenging obstacle that Nick must overcome is evading a team of federal agents led by Sam Neill's David Jenkins, who plans to use Nick as a weapon of espionage. Luckily, Nick isn't alone in his run from his pursuers. While laying low at a friend's beach house, Nick is reunited with a former acquaintance named Alice Monroe, played by Daryl Hannah. As the story progresses, Alice provides Nick companionship in his escape from Jenkins, and the two eventually end up together in the Swiss Alps after defeating the opposing forces. I'm not going to beat around the bush. This romance is easily the dumbest part of the entire film. But before I go into excruciating detail about why this aspect of the film is a complete failure, I think it's a good idea to talk about the things I actually like. The main factor that sets Memoirs apart from other Invisible Man movies is the incorporation of comedic elements.
Taxi!
Typically, most Invisible Man movies are horror films, and the Invisible Man in these films are for the most part seen as villainous characters who are consumed by their unlimited power. Memoirs genre makeover is a welcome addition to the Invisible Man concept, and the way it uses the character's invisibility to create comedic situations is pretty brilliant. The effectiveness of these scenes has to do with the way in which the film chooses to reveal Nick to the audience. It should come as no surprise that the film features a variety of visual gags that takes full advantage of the audience not being able to see Nick. At the same time, there are numerous scenes when Nick's visibility to the viewer results in an equally amusing punchline. While both methods are great on their own, Memoirs' humor reaches another level when the film combines these two techniques. The perfect example of this is the taxicab scene, which shows Nick using an inebriated pedestrian to hitch a ride back to his apartment. The entire sequence plays out like a bizarre scene from Weekend at Bernie's, as Nick engages in invisible puppetry to manipulate a lifeless drunk to pay and even talk to an unsuspecting cab driver. This scene, more than any other, demonstrates the filmmaker's complete understanding of the comedic potential of an Invisible Man movie. In fact, Memoirs of an Invisible Man is probably John Carpenter's second best comedy film, the first being Escape from LA. Unfortunately, critics were less enthusiastic about the film's comedic elements when it first came out. Some of the criticisms accused the film of biting off more than it could chew in terms of its blend of genres. I personally don't have any issue with Memoirs' blend of comedy and thriller. As a matter of fact, some of the best films ever made have successfully incorporated comedy into the action and thriller genre. That being said, Memoirs' biggest misstep in blending genres is its inability to portray a convincing love story. One of the challenges of writing a feature-length script is conveying a realistic romantic relationship. Since the average runtime clocks in around 90 minutes to 2 hours, screenwriters don't have the luxury of constructing character interactions that lack romantic depth. One of the techniques in the screenwriter's playbook to overcome this obstacle is writing a meet-cute, which is exactly what it sounds like. Meet-cutes, by their very nature, are usually comedic interactions between two characters, and they are a great way of conveying the romantic potential to an audience. For whatever reason, this basic principle of screenwriting was completely ignored from Memoirs of an Invisible Man, and the romantic scene we're left with is a disaster of epic proportions. The scene opens with Nick bumping into one of his friends at his country club bar, who invites him to have a drink with his wife and a friend. At first, Nick is reluctant to accept the offer. That is until he meets eyes with Alice for the first time. This moment is actually pretty well done. The cinematography and editing really captures that romantic spark when Alice sees Nick for the first time. Unfortunately, the romantic vibes of the sequence quickly die off once the characters actually speak to one another. The main reason for this is due to the fact that Nick and Alice hardly say anything to one another during this initial meeting. The first time they share words is when George tells Nick that Alice is a documentary film producer.
What kind of documentaries do you produce?
Anthropological stuff, traditional cultures, cosmologies.
After this brief exchange of dialogue, the scene transitions to a later point in the evening when the men and women are having separate conversations. Alice is talking to Ellen about her experiences as a production assistant filming in the Amazon, while Nick talks to George about college football. The problem with this setup is the way the filmmakers inserted this unnecessary barrier between Nick and Alice. If the primary focus of this moment is Nick learning about Alice's career as a filmmaker, why isn't she telling this to Nick? Instead, Nick is placed in the periphery of the social interaction, and he spends the majority of time gawking at her as he sips his cocktail and nibbles on snacks. After some time passes by, the moment finally arrives when Nick talks to Alice for the second time.
So what did you miss most when you were down there?
Hot showers, cheeseburgers. I think Seton Hall will go all the way.
The reason I'm keeping tabs on the amount of times that Nick and Alice actually speak to one another is to illustrate the absurd levels of insanity contained within this next scene transition. This shot represents the precise moment when the filmmakers attempt to pull a fast one on the audience. Even though the shot composition and actor placement are highly suggestive of a romantic connection, nothing about this feels earned, since the characters haven't had enough screen time to get to know one another. What makes matters worse is the fact that this shot features some of the most atrocious dialogue ever put on film.
I hate TV.
Me too. I like music.
I love jazz. Hate weightlifters.
Narcissists.
Love skiing.
Love the ocean and the woods.
I love blonde hair.
Love garlic.
I mean, honestly, what the hell is going on here? I know this is supposed to be some form of cute pillow talk, but it just sounds like the ramblings of two crazy people. If you were to show this one clip to someone who's never seen this film before, I'm sure they would come to the conclusion that the previous scene must have showed these two characters engaged in some kind of muscle relaxer eating contest. Anyways, I'm sure you can guess the scene that follows this one. Yes, that's right, a passionate makeout session in a bathroom, a couple of feet away from where people take their dumps. What a sweet and memorable how they met story. This sequence finally wraps up with Nick and Alice setting up a future date right before they part ways, leaving Nick to say one of the most damning voiceover lines that confirms the worst aspect of this relationship.
In a way, it was all Alice's fault. Maybe if I hadn't met her that night, she hadn't been so incredibly beautiful, I wouldn't have gone back to the bar and drunk myself silly.
Nick's attraction to Alice isn't reliant on her personality, her career as a filmmaker, or even her intense love of cheeseburgers and garlic. Regrettably, the only reason why Nick is attracted to Alice is solely based on shallow values, which is one of the worst crimes a screenwriter can commit. At this point, you might be saying to yourself, yeah, this first meeting sucked, but surely they must have something interesting to talk about once their relationship was fully established.
Nick? You sleep?
No. I was just daydreaming about a New York strip steak, baked potato with sour cream and chives, and a hot fudge sundae.
My final proof of the film's low-quality love story is a deleted scene included with the DVD. It should be noted that this scene is still present in the final film. The only bit that was cut was one line of Alice's dialogue.
Can we just change the subject? I mean, wherever the hell he is, I'm sure he'd be thrilled to know we're talking about him.
I hope he's all right. I liked him. I liked him.
While Daryl Hannah isn't doing her best to sell the line, I think the real reason for its exclusion is because the filmmakers realized they might have gone too far in their attempt at tricking the audience. It's a real shame because this entire disaster could have been avoided if the scriptwriter asked himself the same question the audience will likely ask themselves when judging the believability of a relationship. The question being, why do these people like each other? If the only answer to this question has to do with physical attraction, then the film has failed in conveying a romantic relationship with an acceptable amount of emotional depth. As it stands, Memoirs of an Invisible Man delivers a love story that is insanely preposterous, and at times downright creepy. While the love story of Memoirs is treated like a complete afterthought, the aspect of the film that is taken very seriously are the invisibility effects. This was the only element of the film that received critical praise during its initial release, and for good reason. The film showcases a masterful blend of practical and special effects that really sells the transparent nature of the central character. One of the film's most impressive practical effects is the magnoscopic lab. Instead of turning the entire building invisible, it's revealed that the cyclotron accident only affected certain segments of the structure. Apart from a couple shots that incorporate CGI, the filmmakers use a real-life set to reveal the hollowed-out portions of the magnoscopic lab, and the results are absolutely magnificent. The scene features some really trippy point-of-view shots that show the guts of the building, with various floor sections seemingly floating in mid-air. The entire sequence is a testament to the effectiveness of practical effects, and the concept of an invisible building makes Memoirs incredibly unique when compared to other Invisible Man movies. While the set designers deserve a huge amount of praise for their clever set construction, the true stars of the effects department are the ILM visual artists responsible for creating some really impressive imagery. Some of their best work are the chroma key effects used to remove Chevy Chase's body from the scene. This process required the filmmakers to shoot certain scenes twice, one shot with Chevy Chase and the next with Adam, in order to capture the background imagery. Sometimes this would require the use of a motion control camera that could reproduce the exact camera movements of the initial shot. For a film that is nearly 30 years old, the special effects are just as effective as when the film initially came out, with the exception of a couple shots. Unfortunately, Memoirs of an Invisible Man's legacy as a powerhouse of visual effects is overlooked when compared to the other films that came out during the same period. If you were to ask someone to name 3 films that revolutionized cinema with the use of digital effects, they would probably respond with The Abyss, Terminator 2, and Jurassic Park. Each of these films featured groundbreaking advancements in computer-generated imagery, and the team responsible for these achievements was the same company that created the visual effects for Memoirs of an Invisible Man. And even though Memoirs isn't as revolutionary as the other films mentioned, some of the effects work done by ILM are improvements on their previous efforts. The best example of this is the facial makeup scene, which is very reminiscent of the pseudopod sequence from The Abyss. While the pseudopod is effective in conveying facial expressions, I feel like the makeup scene in Memoirs goes a step further by having Nick's face actually speak and blink his eyes. Regrettably, Memoirs' technical achievements have been mostly forgotten, which is a real shame because there are some effects in this film that are absolutely breathtaking. The crown jewel of these effects is when Nick's features are revealed through raindrops. It's one of the most beautiful moments in the entire film, and it was quite the challenge for the filmmakers to pull off. And don't worry, this isn't a shot of Chevy Chase wearing blackface. The dark makeup was used to capture the moisture highlights on his skin for the final composite. That being said, this is a shot of Chevy Chase wearing brownface.